HistoryNet and Mr. Brass are interviewing Story of the Cosmos, aka Daniel Ray. Tell us about yourself.
Hey guys, how are you?
Not bad.
Oh, good. Wonderful. It's the first time we've all met, at least in voice. Yes, well, I've been a Christian for 26 years. I did not grow up in the church. I came to Christ when I was 24 years old, 24, 25. Over the course of about a 3 to 4 month period, I had two very real convictions that had no particular reason for being on my mind. One was that Jesus was real and the scripture was his word. And basically my faith started from there. And about 4 months later, I was baptized in California, and I've been a believer ever since. I've been a broadcast journalist in the 101st Airborne Division. I've been in the Army for 4 years. And then I have 2 degrees, one in education and one in Christian apologetics. I got from Houston Baptist University. I finished that in 2016. And now I have this book, The Story of the Cosmos, which includes a couple of my former professors from HBU. And so we're really excited about it. And that's my life in a nutshell.
Okay.
Oh, so I mean, since you have a degree in Christian apologetics, would it sort of be like what Aaron Ross says, that you got a degree in fairy tales?
Yes, there's no real intellectual respect for telling people that. I say not people, but generally the sort of the skeptics that are a little bit less than civil about their skepticism. It's kind of they perceive it as a parody degree. Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's funny is we actually do legitimately have like people that work, like scholars that actually do work on fairy tales.
Yes, we do. In fact,
yeah,
2 of my professors actually do that. Dr. Michael Ward is a C.S. Lewis scholar, and he wrote the book Planet Narnia in 2008, which basically was going through Narnia and uncovering what Lewis was doing there. It's a fantastic book. And then my other professor, Dr. Holly Ordway, who's written several books on Christian apologetics, is currently writing a book on J.R.R. Tolkien's modern sources in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Ring. So yeah, we have people, and C.S. Lewis himself was a classicist and studied literature, and these professionals know the difference between myth, and Lewis goes into this about what constitutes myth. And one of the more well-known passages of his talks about the difference between, well, the Gospels are not myth. I know what myth is. This is not what a myth looks like. I mean, these are coming from professional literary scholars that fundamentally study these things and know the differences. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, right. It's the consensus that the Gospels are in the genre of Greco-Roman biographies.
Yeah, that's whether you believe them or not is another story, but the historical consensus is, yes, Greco-Roman biography. Absolutely. Tacitus, Pliny, the historians of that period, how they would write. Yes, absolutely. It's not like stories about the constellations where Zeus is doing several different things and it's several different stories and several different tales. Yeah, there's a huge difference between myth and
several different
myth and yes, absolutely.
So basically, from what I gather, you're a science popularizer of astronomy without the nihilism from guys like Tyson and Carroll.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, Luca. I came to love the cosmos when I was a kid. I started watching Carl Sagan when I was 12, when Cosmos came out in 1980. Kind of dates me, but he got me interested in astronomy. But when I was 12, I didn't know the embedded presuppositional materialistic ideologies that were underlying that TV series. And it's not just me. It's not just me in the book, but me and several other authors, contributors, many of whom are professionals in their field, professional Christian scientists studying astronomy, as well as Michael Ward and Holly Ordway, who are Lewis Tolkien scholars, as I said earlier. We have a wide variety of approaches to the cosmos in our book. It's not just science. We have literature. We have Dr. Paul Gould, who's the chief editor of the book. He's a philosopher. We have William Lane Craig contributing the theology and the doctrine of creation ex nihilo. So we have a broad perspective of theology, history. We even have an art professor contributing a chapter on how art has influenced, or how art is influenced by the heavens. And so I just have a little graphic here. This is Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And this is kind of how we are doing the book here. This is a quote from that story where Elizabeth Bennet, Darcy's a rich aristocrat, and Bennet is a country lady from a large family, and they're together, and the whole story is about pride and prejudice getting in the way of really what's going on. So they're at a ball, and she says, it's your turn to say something, Mr. Darcy. I talked about the dance. You ought to make some kind of remark about the size of the room and the numbers of the couples. So what we're trying to do is bring reason and imagination together in this book. It's not just, oh, the stars are made of gas, and Jupiter is this far away, and the sun is 864,000 miles across. We have things like that, but we also have integrated into it imagination as well. So we're coupling the heavens and the earth, science and religion, reason and imagination, the male-female, general and special revelation, and God and man. So there's a coupling in our story of the cosmos. It's a dance. It's creativity. It's science. It's religion. It's reason, imagination. Men and women. We have both male and female contributors. And then we talk about the difference between general and special revelation. We focus more on Psalm 19 and the general revelation of God's nature and creation through what he has made. So that's the focus of our book.
Oh, but haven't you heard? We're just insignificant specks of stardust in an uncaring universe that...
Oh, yes.
The Black Space Doctor said so.
That's what... that's the modern myth of science. I actually have a slide on that, and I'll go to it really quickly.
If that's the case, what's the fucking point?
What is the point of, if we're cosmologically insignificant, what's the point of saying we're cosmologically? Let me see if I can find this. Okay, so this is Dr. Tyson's book. It spent 60 or 70 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a very short work. It's a very popular work. It's a very easy work. I read it, and it is what it says, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry. It's a short little book. It was very popular. I think it has sold over 1 million copies, spent many, many weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. But I wanted to show you an excerpt from one chapter. This is from my notes. So Neil deGrasse Tyson was mentored by Carl Sagan and took over for the revised 2013 Cosmos series on Fox and National Geographic. And in his 2017 bestseller, Astrophysics for People in a Hurry, these words appear in just one chapter called Between the Galaxies. And this is how he describes the universe. And I just pulled these words out as I was looking through the chapter, because when I finished this chapter, I'm like, wait a minute, why do I feel like I was just in a car accident? And I went back and I looked, and I'm like, oh my goodness. Collide, mess, warped, burst, spawned, violent, collision, strewn hither and yon, escaped, blobs, adrift, mayhem, flotsam, ammo, exploded, smithereens, homeless, cannibalism, ripped apart, consumed, corpses, eaten, junk, monstrous, hazardous, death, suffocated, dangers, and seething. And that is the, nature red in tooth and claw. That is the kind of narrative that we are being, given by popular science. So that is kind of what we hope to counter in our book is the baleful influences of a presuppositionalist materialist position that the universe is all there is, that the cosmos is all there is, or that all that ever was. This is just a poem from the English poet Alfred Lloyd Tennyson that was inspired by the Pleiades and the constellations that you see there of Taurus. So here is Orion, and there's the V shape of Taurus, and there's the Pleiades. These are the constellations we see late summer, fall, and winter times. And Tennyson, and this is a beautiful poem. I love this part of it. Locksley Hall is the poem, and he says, "Many a night from yonder ivied casement, ere I went to rest, did I look on great Orion sloping slowly in the west. Many a night I saw the Pleiades rising through the mellow shade, glitter like a swarm of fireflies tangled in a silver braid." And this, I bring this up, guys, because when I talk to skeptics, a lot of times in Twitter, especially, or social media, they say sometimes, some of them will say, well, I'm a humanist, but they are absolutely they don't like talking about in general, I find, with the exception of a couple of my friends that I've talked to about this. My friend Zach, who does the Apologia podcast, is not like this, but a lot of times they don't even talk about the humanities, art, music, literature. It's completely eviscerated from their vocabulary. I've never engaged really, with the exception of a few, thoughtful dialogue about literature, poetry, art, music, or any of what we would call the humanities. So for people that call themselves humanist, they don't seem to be or have any particular interest in what makes us human, like poetry and all.
And if they're anti-theists, then they're not humanists.
Yeah, it is. When you're anti-theist, you're anti-human. I mean, you are against what humanity is as being created in the image of God.
Yeah. So, like, who is your favorite pop scientist?
Let me get to him. Hold on. Let me get out of this, and I will show you. I'll show you my favorite. The ones I work with, and there may not be the most popular, but I want to show you who's in our book, and tell you. So, this is my thesis advisor, Dr. Michael Ward. He's a Lewis scholar. Of course, you know Bill Craig. I really admire Bill. He got me into apologetics, and it's amazing to me that my first book that I am co-authoring with Bill is just fantastic. I'm so excited about that. There's Dr. Ordway. She's the Tolkien scholar. She's writing a book on Tolkien. She was my writing professor and apologetics professor. She was great. But here is, I'm a big fan of Dr. Barnes. Met him in person. He's in our book. He wrote this book, A Fortunate Universe. He is probably the world's leading expert in fine-tuning and what fine-tuning is.
He debunked that. He debunked that crackpot historian on Bayesian probability.
Yeah, Luke is scary smart, and he's super kind and super nice, but he has he can pull stuff out of his head without even looking at his notes. He's incredibly gifted, an excellent communicator. He will be here in Texas in a couple of weeks for our book release. But I love Dr. Barnes. He's great, fantastic guy, down to earth, super guy. He and my friend Alan Hainline do this chapter together, and just basically break down fine-tuning. Both of them together talk about fine-tuning. Alan is a satellite engineer, but they wrote this chapter together for the Everyman. And I love this little excerpt here. They talk about Legos. And he says, we both played with Lego as a kid. And they talk about, now imagine a toy with no assembly required because it self-assembles into cool toys that can fly, swim, and run. These building blocks can form a variety of highly sophisticated machines. They can even replicate themselves so that you can share toys with others. They require no batteries because they harness energy from the environment. They are completely recyclable. Existing toys can use old toys to make new toys. Would you believe it? So they describe, the biology and life on Earth using the analogy of Lego blocks. And the whole chapter's like that, just very easy to digest. So I'm a big fan of Barnes. I also admire Dr. Guillermo Gonzalez, who wrote this book, The Privileged Planet, with J.W. Richards several years ago. Guillermo talks about the eschatology of habitable zones. In other words, there is this quest in science to find the Earth-like planet so that we can find life, and so we can once and for all say that theism is nonsense. See here, look at this bacteria on this planet.
That wouldn't really do anything.
No, it would not. It would not.
You would think these other alien civilizations would know that there is a God.
Yeah, but here's what basically I'm summarizing Guillermo's chapter in a nutshell because he's a planetary scientist. So here's a grapefruit. And you read a lot of times in astronomy nowadays that, oh, look, we found an Earth-like planet. Well, and Guillermo breaks this down into wonderful language that's easy to understand. He's like, well, he doesn't say this. This is my analogy. But basically, here's a grapefruit, put an NBA label on it, and call it basketball-like. And that's about the difference between, what an Earth-like planet is versus what they're really seeing out there. The only similar differences are that they are about the same distance from their star. Maybe the same mass, maybe not, but other than that, there are so many other factors that have to go into a planet to be Earth-like. It's not even funny. So I love Dr. Gonzalez. I like his work. And then this gentleman, have you ever heard of Brother Guy? He is the Vatican astronomer, and he works at observatories in Europe, and he also has an observatory in Arizona as well, and he spends time in both. Brother Guy is an expert in meteorites and meteors and asteroids. He studies that stuff. That's his life study. But he is a Jesuit priest who is also an astrophysicist. So there is empirical proof that science and religion are and can be and do go together. Brother Guy is fantastic.
It's not even up for debate that they go together.
No, and
History of it.
you guys, I'm sure if you're on Twitter, you know Sarah.
Salviander, yeah.
Salviander. This is Sarah Salviander. She does a fantastic job of on her chapter on black holes. Now, when Sarah was writing the chapter on black holes last year, of course, we didn't know about M87. M87 is a galaxy, Messier 87. In April, we snapped the first photograph of basically what is the event horizon, or the closest thing that we've ever taken to a photograph of a black hole we found in the middle of M87. So this was a once-in-a-lifetime unique opportunity, historic event. But Sarah's chapter just so happens to coincides with this so wonderfully. I mean, we didn't know about M87 until she had finished the chapter, but her chapter goes into the history of black holes, how they came about, the theoretical difficulties, searching for them, the mind-bending truths about them. She weaves a wonderful tale, and she compares it all to the mysterious and awe-inspiring, humbling nature of God as well. So she does a fantastic job of that. So those are the scientists I admire right now. They're all ones that I've worked with, and they're just fantastic people. All of them were super sweet to be able to contribute to a book project. And so I'm very grateful for it. Luke Barnes, Guillermo Gonzalez. Of course, I like Dr. Tyson. He's a gifted communicator. I just don't like his
not his nihilism.
Yeah, the nihilism, materialism, kinds of things. And so
I like Mikio Kaku.
Mikio is coming around. He's actually sounding more every time I read him. I haven't read anything from him lately, but the last couple of times I've heard him interviewed or seen quotes by him, he seems to be more leaning in a theistic direction than it's kind of surprising.
Or deistic.
Yeah, deistic. Yeah, right. So I'm kind of rambling. If you guys want to ask more questions or share what you want, I'm just going with the flow. But yeah.
Tell us about how exactly you found God.
Okay. Well, that's goes back to 1993.
God, I miss those years.
I was in California. I was single, and I had a nice place to live. I had everything going for me. Wasn't thinking about religion by any stretch of the means. And let me see if I can get out of here just a second. Okay, so there's the pale blue dot. We can go back to that. But anyway, I had no Christian upbringing, and around about 1992, 93, like I said earlier, I had two convictions sort of come out of nowhere. One was that Jesus was a real person, and that the scripture, the Bible, was his word. I'd never studied apologetics, never read anything about the Bible, didn't know anything about the Bible. And all of a sudden I'm dealing with these two thoughts simultaneously, that Jesus is real and the Bible is his word, and I needed to read it. So I did. And over a course of about 3 or 4 months, I came to understand my need of Christ, and I was baptized in a church in Thousand Oaks, California in in the spring of 1993. But it was more like a gradual, it wasn't a black to white. Wasn't doing drugs, or it wasn't a terrible coming out of a horrible situation. It was a very gradual, progressive revelation of God to me in the person of Jesus. And then I just reading the Bible and taking a journal, and I didn't know anything about the Bible. I read from Genesis to Revelation. I'm like, wow, what is all this? And I just kept reading it, and just kept taking notes, and just getting involved with church and doing little mission trips and going to Sunday school and just learning. But I can't pinpoint. I can pinpoint about a time, but I can't pinpoint a day or an hour. But at some point I was able to confess Jesus as Lord, repent of my sin, or understand the need of Christ's righteousness. And but I think that all happened gradually. It certainly all didn't happen at once. Even when I was baptized, I'm not sure I knew what I was doing.
What started it is that you figured out that Yeshua was a historical figure.
It wasn't anything, Luca, that was a result of a deliberate cognitive process of studying this. The conviction was, and it sounds elementary school simple, but the conviction was Jesus is real. And I don't have any idea how or why that started, because I knew Christians. I thought they were nice people. I had nothing against Christianity. I was not a virulent atheist. I was not anything like that at all. I think I would believe in God in a generic sense, but I certainly was not an atheist that in the classical sense of the word, but I never really thought I needed Jesus, or never really thought about who Jesus was, or it was like all of a sudden this Jesus person is real. And it was just like that, just like I'm explaining it to you. Oh my gosh, Jesus is real. What do I do? Read the Bible. And that's how it happened. And then it was just like over a 4-month period before I actually ended up, from that conviction till the time I got baptized, was about 4 or 5 months.
Like, did you read any books on the historical Jesus and stuff like that? Or was it just a thought that came to you?
Just a thought, and 2 thoughts: that Jesus, and then the Bible, and then read the Bible and write down and ask questions about the Bible. So I was asking all kinds of questions about the Bible to people that I knew read the Bible. And they're like, well, that's great, Dan. That's wonderful. And so I had 3 or 4 friends that were talking to me about it and asking, and I was, they would help me walk through the questions I had, but I didn't read any literature, any historical literature. I didn't read any, Case for Jesus, or, nothing. No, it was just so weird. But then, when I was in the military, I started listening to a Mars Hill audio journal by Ken Myers. It's a Mars Hill audio journal by Ken Myers on cassette. And basically Ken would interview people, Christian authors, and have a 20-minute extended conversation. You can get these cassettes, and they were, they're on CD now, and he still does this. But listening to these people and then buying the book and reading the book, I'm like, whoa, there's a whole tradition of Christian thought here. This is so wonderful. And I would really attribute the grounding and understanding of my intellectual faith to Ken Myers and the Mars Hill audio journal and all the books that he introduced me to through that journal. It is a fantastic resource. He still does it. The Mars Hill audio journal, Ken Myers. And it's just fantastic. It's very thoughtful. It's like podcasting before there was podcasting. Ken used to work for NPR, and he does extended interviews in the journal. And I learned about C.S. Lewis. I learned about historical criticism, about art and music and theology. It was just the best thing that could have happened to me. And I started to listen to that one in my first couple of years as a Christian, and really grounded me in the historical apologetic sort of reality of Christian faith.
What would you say, what do you think is the best evidence for the existence of God?
I think I have 2, and let me go back to the beginning here, just to be visual for everybody. My 2 are right here. The general revelation of creation and the special revelation through Scripture. I mean, for me, my 2 cents, these are the best evidences that we have. Of course, when I say evidence, I don't mean that it's going to be something that convinces everybody. God has built the universe to give human beings a say-so, if you will, for lack of a better word, the ability to participate in interpreting and understanding and deciding if they choose to see this or not. But for me, when we talk about the universe, especially with all the conversations I've had with skeptics over the years, I mean, God is unavoidably there in the conversation, whether you're for him or against him. And then a special revelation through Scripture, I see the more and more when you bring up Bible verses or whatever, just the antagonism, the hatred, the contempt, that, and then just how the Bible reads me, just how I get encouragement from it. And just how much I enjoy reading the Word and recognizing my favorite book in the Bible is Job, but it's a book that I read, and as I read it, it reads me, and I have no other book on the shelf that does that. And so I think creation, basically the heavens and the earth, and Scripture are my 2 big ones.
I notice you get attacked by a village atheist once in a while on Twitter. Like, what do you say that gets under their thin skins?
I tell you, Luca, I when I first started Twitter, I did so naively. So I would go around and I'd find atheists and I'd make comments. And I generally wanted to do that with a genuine interest in having a conversation. But I find that when you jump in, for me, when I've jumped into a conversation and I'm sort of asking for it. So what I've done is I put up something, or I'll respond to something that is a Christian, and then occasionally somebody will jump in and say something. And so usually I'll respond to people if it's a thread where I'm tagged, I don't mind doing that now, but I don't go looking for it. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't try to be trolly. Um, I enjoy the conversations. I like to be civil. But it's really interesting to see the kinds of reactions that I get to things that I post. I think, oh, nobody's going to pay any attention to this, and then I got 5 or 6 villagers after me. Every once in a while, I do have a nice conversation with a civil skeptic, but for the most part, I get a lot of nasty ones, and when they get really nasty, I just mute them or block them. So
We might,
I don't
me and
know.
me and Brass might might do an episode reading hate comments from various people on Twitter. You mind if we use yours?
Oh, sure, absolutely. To me, Luca, it's public. So if it's out there, and we've talked about it, hey, it's free game. You're good. So yeah, by all means.
What I
Absolutely.
might just end up doing is like I might just have an episode on my show where I just have an entire like show where I'm just showing all the trolling tweets I do to atheists
Yeah.
on Twitter.
Well, this, it's interesting though. One thing that does come up a lot, and this is what I like to do. Skeptics, because I'm mostly cosmological universe focused, and they'll
Before you go into that, there's
Sure.
there's legitimate skeptics, then there's the trademark skeptics.
Yeah, I agree. It's not skepticism per se that's bad. Good skepticism, healthy skepticism is fine. We're all that
Absolutely.
way. But skepticism that is that turns into denial, or skepticism, denial masking as skepticism is not healthy. But a lot of times I get people that are pontificating to me about the universe. I'm like, oh, you're a Christian and you wrote a book about the universe. What are you, an idiot? I mean, it's remarkable. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter who you work with. Doesn't matter what you say. Doesn't matter what you link to. For a lot of people, there's just no accepting the fact that your Bronze Age myths have any relevance to the modern era. And so, you get word salad, Bronze Age myth, all kinds of things. In fact,
all that shit.
I have a list. Let me see if I
Oh
can
yeah,
find it.
I have the second video I ever did on YouTube is like most of their buzzwords in one video.
Yeah, well, so I've collected all of these. These are like really, literally right off Twitter from things that have been said to me on Twitter. So I just started collecting them, and this is what I get from people who claim to be logic and reason and whatnot. Now, some of it's trolling, but I've seen every one of these phrases on my Twitter handle at some point in the last year.
Such free thinkers think alike, don't they?
I mean, I didn't have to. I mean, these get repeated over and over again. This is about it.
Yeah.
You see the variation on a theme, but it doesn't vary far from this. And so, what I'll try to do to encourage civil dialogue is I'll try to post citations. I'll try to post links. I'll try to post quotations with annotated footnotes, and I'll say, here's a thought, here's a thought, here's a thought. And I get a lot of this. A lot of times, word salad.
Hey, Bresh, you got those memorized?
Oh yeah, I got those memorized. Pretty much, Bronze Age desert goat herder who believes in fairy tales written by illiterate, superstitious primitives.
Yeah, that's the narrative that I see a lot.
Even though illiterate people can't write.
Yeah, and the one thing I find interesting too is this one, the big one I have in black. I see this most of the time. There's no evidence for God. There's no evidence for miracles, or there's zero evidence for God or miracles.
There's so much evidence, it's ridiculous.
Well,
but they'll grudgingly admit that there's evidence. It's just not good evidence, which is also
some of them will do that. Some of them will do that.
It's also a lie, but
I get a lot of the all caps zero evidence commentary, and what I replied to, I said, well, if there's zero evidence, then how do you know about God or miracles to begin with? I mean, you must have a source from where you're getting all of this.
I mean, like, how do you know about Zeus or Odin or Ra?
Yeah, I mean, zero evidence. I don't know. Can you unpack that a little bit? But one thing that I love to do, I enjoy doing, because I love talking about astronomy. I can talk about anything. I'm not a science. You said earlier, it's kind of a nice term. I'm a science popularizer. I love to make My friend and I, Wayne, who do our podcast, we try to humanize science. We try to talk about the human aspect of it and how much we enjoy about the universe. And so a lot of times I'll say, when I'm in a heated debate with a skeptic, I'll say, well, what about this? Or what about this? And I'll show them a picture of the universe. What is this? What do you think this is? I have no idea. It doesn't
Oh,
matter.
they're just hurling balls of rock and bits of matter.
Yeah, that they're just gas. So one of the things I enjoy doing, this is a wonderful little thing I do in general when I give astronomy presentations. So you outline, this is the night sky over Texas right now. This will be out tonight and for the next while. Jupiter is out in the southern hemisphere. It's beautiful. It's the largest, it's closest it's been to Earth in a long time. This is Antares. The diameter of Antares is 750 million miles across. One of the biggest super red giants you can see with the naked eye. This is Zubin el-Ganubi, one of the used to be one of the extended crabs of Scorpius. And there's the constellation of Scorpius. You can see the J there. These are the pivotal points in the constellation of Libra now, but back in the day, these used to be the claws, Zubin el-Ganubi and Zubin esh-Shamali of the Scorpius. But if you take Antares, Zubin el-Ganubi, and Spica, which are always in this position this time of year, these three, you can make a baseball diamond out of them. Through Menkent, you have dead away center field there. You have Antares to this point, and then you have Spica. So you can line all this up geographically, kind of create your triangle here. And this is the wonder about, to me, we were talking about evidence, what counts as evidence? Well, the fact that you can go out and look at the sky and triangulate stars to find things, to me, is amazing. It's how people have navigated through this globe before there was GPSs and cell phones. What are all these things pointing to, guys? You guys have any idea? This little circle down here, how many stars do you think are in that little circle right there?
Let's see. Looks like one, but it may be more than that.
There it is right there. That is from La Palma, Spain. No light pollution. That is the largest star cluster in our Milky Way. That is the Omega Centauri star cluster. Now, that is on a clear, dark night, no light pollution in the southern hemisphere where you can see it more now. But where we are latitude, longitude-wise, you can see it here in Texas. But the farther north you go, the harder that is to see. But here's a little help from the Hubble Space Telescope. This is what it looks like even more close up. And then a deeper view. Any idea, guys, how many stars astronomers have estimated that are in this thing? 10 million stars. And these red ones are super red giants, and they are 100 times, 200 times larger than our own sun, depending. And there's blue stars, and according to current astronomical theory, blue stars are young. So you have red stars that are old and dying, blue stars that are young, all over this thing. And the average distance between each star in this cluster is about 2 trillion miles, 1/3 of a light year. A light year is about 6 trillion miles. So even though they look packed together, the average distance between these two is about 2 trillion miles. So I put this up sometimes when I'm talking to skeptics. I'm like, do you guys know what this is? And nobody has identified this yet when I do it.
And the village atheists who try to lecture you about you not knowing how science works can't tell you that.
That's the kind of the point, and I try to be nice about it, but I'm like, okay, you just told me what the beginning of the universe was or wasn't. You just told me what the universe does or it doesn't do. You laid out all these facts about the universe, or you thought they were facts, and then I show you this, which is the largest star cluster in the I mean, astronomers know this picture like the back of their hand. So I'm like, if you don't know this, I'm not sure that your cosmological information that you've just passed along to me, I'm not saying it's okay not to know, but it's a whole different thing when you don't know and you pontificate as though you do.
There's no way to tell the village atheists that they're just paying lip service to science rather than just knowing anything about it.
It's a very hard line to walk. Now, you and Brass do a service in one way of basically, calling them out for that kind of thing. I'm a little bit more, I take a different tack, but still it's very frustrating. I mean, I struggle with depression. So even, negative comments, I've been a Christian, I can deal with it. I'm not, hung up on it, but still it personal comments, when they take their toll. I'm sort of weak-minded and I give in to personal opinion a lot of times, but they do take their toll. So I have to limit myself in that capacity because I just get frustrated like anybody else, because when people get personal, you don't know anything, you're stupid, you're dumb, you're an ignorant fool, and that kind of stuff. It's
It's
not easy.
similar propaganda that Nazis did towards the Jews before they ended up doing shit to them.
Well, it's interesting too, because you talk about Hitler, and people will say, I've seen this conversation more than once on Twitter. Hitler was a Christian.
No,
Hitler
he wasn't. He was a quasi-deist with pantheistic leanings.
Right, but look at the point. The interesting thing is that an atheist will say Hitler was a Christian. And to me, when I see that, I'm like, well, you still believe what he said? I mean, that's how he got away with doing what he did, because everybody believed what he said.
Yeah.
I mean,
that is an interesting point.
You are you going to take him at his word? Because half of Europe did. And so people are still believing things that Hitler is saying. I mean, that to me is not, I don't know, if you know Orthodox Christianity, you pretty much can tell that the Fuhrer was not he wasn't on the communion registry. I don't know.
Then some will even try to paint it Stalin and Mao broadly, and that they were seen as gods. Like, no, they weren't. That's just they don't know what a cult of personality is. First off,
right.
Yeah.
So
here's what's funny is like, Hitler, he actually got into Markianism.
Stalin did also.
Basically they had gotten their theology from this German theologian who was basically Marxian, where they believed that the Old Testament wasn't real, and it was just the New Testament. They ended up cutting out the Old Testament entirely from the Bible, and they removed a lot of Paul's writings.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, they bastardized the Bible in order to Aryanize it.
Yeah, that's kind of what you have to do if you want to use it to promote something other than what it's actually promoting. You have to do. I mean, we are all got to be careful with that, but still, I think that is one of the big problems with early 20th century, in the way, if you go back even to our founding, Jefferson's attitude of cutting scripture out, and things can't possibly have been miraculous, and Jesus was just a good teacher.
Yeah, but he and Franklin and Washington did have respect for Christianity.
Yes, they were not.
They themselves were deists, but
yeah, it was mostly a deistic, and there was absolutely a much more of an undercurrent of respect for Christianity than we have today in our culture.
Jefferson wasn't even a deist, really. He was more of a Unitarian.
Yeah, that's true. I need to go back to my colonial history, but I used to be big into colonial history early on in my Christian walk.
And Franklin and Washington were deists, but they also had respect for Christianity and its heritage. And separation of church and state was more or less to protect the church from the government, not the other way around.
Right. I know that Washington.
And then there's a Napoleon who was also a deist in his time when France was getting out of its militant atheism.
Yes. The French Revolution didn't work out too well. 10-day work week. All that stuff. Robespierre, Max, the guillotine, let them eat cake, and you try to do away with Christianity, and you try to make your culture religion free, and it's not going to last.
Even Danton had to reconcile with Catholicism later on.
Yeah. But I think Washington, in a couple of his letters, I have a collection of his letters. He mentions Jesus a couple of times, but I think for the most part, by and large, you had in practice a deistic approach to religion.
I've been there, by the way.
Yes, Times Square.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to point out what was missing in this photograph. We just saw 10 million suns. And here you are in New York, where you just look up from Times Square and you can't see a single star,
because the city lights just
light pollution. Yeah. So my friend who built our website, her name is Sarah. She has this dark sky.
Salviander?
No, this is another Sarah. My friend Sarah, who built I have two Sarah friends, Sarah Salviander and my friend Sarah, who works here. She has this organization that she runs, and she is proactively telling people about how to make your city a dark sky city. There's an official dark sky city in Flagstaff. Flagstaff, Arizona is an official dark sky city. The International Dark Skies Association goes around and gives you the label of official dark sky or dark sky spot. And basically it's how to improve to see the night sky from a city. And you can do this in Flagstaff with just eliminating certain types of outdoor lighting at night. So Sarah she has this website. She has a lot of great resources if you want to know where, like dark sky maps, where you want to go to see stars. Sarah knows all the dark sky places in and around. There's wonderful resources there to find out more about how you can make a location dark skies. Yeah. A little plug. Now, this is just, I want to show you guys this. This is how hungry people are to see the stars. This was just last weekend, or this past weekend in the Grand Canyon. This was a standing room only Grand Canyon star party on the 22nd. There were, not all pictured here, but you can see in the back, standing room only, there was over 400 people that showed up for this event. And it's a fantastic event. I want to go next year, but people are hungry to see stars. I mean, it's just a forgotten treasure that we've lost. And it's in the hands of the experts now. And so and part of my delight with this book, hopefully, will be to get common people back into doing things like this, getting families and friends together, going out looking at the stars and having civil conversations about what it all means. And, for me, I look at the stars and I think of Christ, of course, but, just to have civil conversation again about the universe and to enjoy the beauty.
Is your book out yet?
It's coming out July 16th. It'll be out in a couple of weeks. Coming out on the anniversary of the Apollo 11 launch date, cool. 50 years ago. Yeah. So, but yeah, this is it's what I love to do. This is, do you guys recognize constellations at all? Do you know stars or constellations, either of you?
Yeah, so that went into it.
This is Orion. This is Taurus, and the Pleiades. And then over in the right is Venus. This was a couple of years ago.
And they didn't get the Big Dipper in there.
No, the Dipper would be in this picture. The Dipper would be behind us. This is Taurus, the V-shaped or the Hyades cluster. It's a cluster of stars in a V shape. And then over here is the Pleiades. Now that I'm going to talk a little bit about the Pleiades. There's Aldebaran. That's the eye of Taurus. That's 38 million miles in diameter, 38 times larger than our sun. And then the Pleiades, one of the most famous star clusters, recognizable star clusters. I already showed you that poem. I want to show you the Pleiades and how they've influenced us even today. So it's a beautiful, this is from the Hubble Space Telescope. And the legend is that at one time there were 7. Now you can see this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. You can see 6 of them from the ground. If you were just to see the Pleiades from standing on the ground, you could see 6 of them. Of course, there's more than 6 there. You can see all this in a telescope. But this is Atlas. This is Alcyon, Merope, Electra, Maia, and Taygeta. Those are the 6. And there's a legend that says there was a 7th one. Ancient legends going all the way back. We don't know exactly what that was, but you may recognize this constellation as this. You guys know what that is? That's the Subaru emblem for the Subaru car. In Japanese, this means unity. Subaru means unity. These are unified stars. So there's Atlas right there. And that's Alcyon, Maia, and Taygeta going that way. And then Merope and Electra going that way. But that's the emblem on the Subaru car. And then the Pleiades are one of the few constellations that are mentioned in Scripture twice, in Amos and in the book of Job, where God asks Job, can you bind the chains or some influences? Some scriptures say the influences of the Pleiades. And this is it's just wonderful. I just love to know star names, to look at the stars, to contemplate the stars. It reminds me of what David did in Psalm 8. When I look at the stars, the works of your fingers. What is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of man that you care for him?
Show us more pictures of stars and supernovas. And
yes. Galaxies. Okay. So, yeah, awesome. We got some of this. So this is what you really have to do to see the stars, is to get up on a mountaintop somewhere and get away from the light pollution. One of my favorite scriptures, get yourself up on a high mountain, O Zion, bearer of good news. Lift up your voice, O mighty Jerusalem, bearer of good news. Lift it up and do not fear. Say to the cities of Judah, here is your God. And so the heavens declare the glory of God, and the higher up you go, the closer you get to that glory. It's wonderful. Okay, so this is some stuff.
My profile pictures of God.
Cool. Where do you guys, you don't have to tell me where you live. Are you in the Northern Hemisphere?
I'm in Florida.
Okay. So you
technically in the technically in the Bible Belt, but not. It's the most cultured city there, so it's unrecognizable.
Okay,
from the rest of the South.
So you guys, if you go out, you'll be able to see this. We're in the same hemisphere to be able to see this. Okay, so this is out during the summertime. This is my screenshot of Stellarium. Stellarium is a wonderful software program you can get for your PC, stellarium.org. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but it's free and ad-free, and I use it to do star names and find deep sky objects with my telescope. But this is what you'll see above your heads every night this summer. This is the summer triangle of Deneb, Altair, and Vega. That is the summer triangle. Now, if you're in a dark sky area, you'll be able to see these. And the Milky Way, what's cool about the summer triangle is that the Milky Way galaxy goes right through it, right through the middle of it just about. So if you can find these three stars, and Saturn is out tonight. This is a screenshot of tonight. This is looking east. And if you can see these three stars, then you know that the Milky Way is going right through there. So that's the summer triangle. That's one of the famous hallmarks, landmarks in the sky, sky marks of astronomers. Now there's also, so you can see the Milky Way going through there. Now there's also another constellation that is within the summer triangle, and that is Cygnus, or the Northern Cross. And so there's the cross shape. That's within the triangle. So there's Deneb, which is the tail of, now this is also called Cygnus or the swan. So you can, some people see it as a cross, some people see it as a swan with the tail and the head. You can call it either one. Now at the foot of the cross, or the head of Cygnus, is this little star. And so if you're out, and then this is something you can do without a telescope, you find Vega and Altair, again, your summer triangle, and right in between Vega and Altair, about halfway, is this little star. And this is one of the neat things about astronomy you can do. You can triangulate these stars. This star is called Albireo, and it's kind of not exactly in the middle of them, but this is how I find deep sky objects and stars. I just make triangles and shapes with stars, and I'm like, oh, there it is. So I can find it with my telescope, and this is kind of what I do. So what's cool about Albireo is that this is an actual picture of it. It's an actual binary star system. So it's a beautiful yellow golden star and a smaller, younger hot blue star. And these are binary stars, and these actually are in gravitational orbit with one another. And about 60 to 70% of our universe is filled with binary stars. So most stars, a majority rather than a minority, actually have companions. Some have 2 stars, some have 3. There are even 4 star systems as well. And in our book, one of the chapters is called The Glorious Dance of Binary Stars. It's written by a binary star expert, Dr. David Bradstreet, who works as a professor at Eastern Pennsylvania. He's the sweetest man I've ever met. He is excited about the chapter. He's been doing this for decades. He loves studying stars, but his whole chapter is on binary stars. But this is one of the most beautiful. You can see this with binoculars, more spectacular, of course, in the telescope. You can't really see it with the naked eye. But it is a beautiful sight in a telescope. It is a binary star system. So when you hear people, this is one of the mucks that you hear of from secular scientists sometimes, our sun is an ordinary star. No, it's not. It's actually in the 40% minority of stars that do not have a companion, which makes it very unique. It's also very calm, and it's the perfect light. It's the perfect temperature. It's the perfect size, and we are situated at the perfect distance in order for it to give us the light that it does. So it's actually in a minority of stars because the majority of stars are binary stars.
Are you going to send your copies of your book to Tyson, Carroll, and all those others?
Dr. Carroll has been sent a copy, and he actually tweeted about it a couple of days ago. He was very nice and respectable. He is. And he just said, well, it's unlikely to convince me, but he didn't say anything now.
He's a presuppositional materialist, so it's...
Yeah, he is. He has a new book coming out that I think he puts it on the line and says, yes, there are many universes with many of our doppelgangers in them. I think he bites the bullet and just says it. I think I
don't think it's far-fetched that there's multiple universes, but there is a lot of skepticism about that.
Yeah, I have actually...
And Tyson also thinks that there's digital physics are legit.
Yeah, you leave the science grid, you leave the empirical science grid, and you get into metaphysics and philosophy and all the implications of what.
Well, neither of them know philosophy, so.
Well, that's where it starts to get. I mean, that's the thing. I think we have a professional philosopher in our book, Dr. Paul Gould, and science is messy. It's not all rigorous empirical knowledge, as you guys know. In fact, I'm sure you all know that the logical positivism as a theory of knowledge last century, where philosophers got together and had this theory that all knowledge should be justified empirically. All truth claims should be justified empirically, of course, but the philosophy itself, the foundation of this thinking, could not be justified empirically. And nobody could agree upon how you would ground knowledge empirically. So it died out. It was logical positivism, empiricism per se, as a form of knowledge, that all truth, I mean, you hear it in the Village Atheist commentary that science is the only way to truth. It's the best way to truth. It's the only method to the truth that we know. That kind of thing. But it's a sort of zombie epistemology where they keep trying to resurrect this idea of all knowledge must be of the empirical stripe, but that's impossible. And not only is it impossible, it's a philosophy that died out over a century ago. And so science is more of a creative, and that's what our book gets into. There is philosophy in science. There's nothing wrong with a philosopher or a scientist doing philosophy. It just needs to be good philosophy. There's nothing wrong.
Make sure your book gets a good publisher.
Yeah, well, it is. We're on Harvest House. We're out, and we have an excellent publisher. They've been really good, so we're very happy with them. But Paul is a professional philosopher, and he talks about philosophy, and we show how all of our contributors, Brother Guy, Bill Craig, Sarah Salviander, we all talk about it's not just rigorous logical empiricism. There's a blend, and we're all humans. We're creative, we're thoughtful, we love, we have relationships, and we like art, we like music. I mean, Einstein played the violin. We're human beings, and human beings do science. And so we show throughout the book how that creativity works together in our humanity in making discoveries.
Carol might find it unlikely to convince him because Craig wrote it and Craig lost a debate to him.
They have that. That I don't know how. I'm sure they have mutual respect for one another, but I don't know how. I don't know.
Like an actual scientist versus an actual philosopher.
Yeah, it was. I know Dr. Carroll does get philosophical sometimes in his presentations, which is completely fine. I don't criticize him for it. It's just when it comes to theology, the conclusions can be a little tenuous.
Well, he's not very philosophically grounded either.
Yeah, I've only watched a couple. I've read his book, The Big Picture. He's a very gifted writer, and he's a very gifted communicator, and he seems like a very nice guy. But the metaphysics and the philosophy, and especially the theology of his thinking about God, is misdirected, I think. But you guys know where this phrase came from, right?
Yeah, Sagan, right?
Yeah, this is basically the science mythos of this is the real myth of our time, that any human being could actually make this proclamation. It's unscientific. It kind of reads like a secular version of Moses, but it has been embedded in the minds of an entire generation since it came out in 1980. Over 500 million people have seen the Cosmos series, where Carl says, cosmos is all that is.
It's not bad. And his motto, billions and billions.
Actually, he never said that. According that I read his biography.
I saw him say it when I watched it.
He doesn't actually say billions and billions together. He says billions and trillions and millions a lot, but he was on Johnny Carson once, and he was telling Carson that he looked through everything that he had ever said or wrote, and he actually claims to never have said billions and billions together. His own words. I have to go back and look at.
That's how I remember seeing it, but
yeah,
it was a good show anyway.
Oh, I love Cosmos. I do. I just don't like the material.
And the new version was pretty good too, except when Tyson got into the bad history.
Yeah, right. It made the church look like, it was pretty bad.
And they made Bruno out to be some scientist who was martyred for science, even though he was a hermetic nutcase.
He had a lot of strange views. He did.
And the Galileo and Kepler were like, thank God that lunatic's dead.
You guys familiar with this image?
Yeah, the pale blue dot.
Right. And this is pretty much, if you didn't know who Carl Sagan was in Cosmos, you probably know him from this, the pale blue dot quote.
And for advising Kubrick on 2001: Space Odyssey.
Yes.
That's one of the best movies of all time.
It's an excellent movie. This is the quote from a book. This is actually not in Cosmos. Neither was the image, because the image came out in Valentine's Day of 1990. That's Voyager 1 satellite taking a picture of Earth from 3.7 million miles, billion. Goodness gracious, I forgot. It must be billion. 3.7 billion miles away. And, look how small it is. Now, what's the sunbeam? Well, it's a reflection coming off of Voyager 1 itself. What I find in very interesting, gentlemen, is what. So there's this quote that everybody knows. But then shortly, right after he says this quote, he explains it. He's like, what's going on here? And he explains it this way. Because of the reflection of sunlight off the spacecraft, the Earth seems to be sitting in a beam of light as if there were some special significance to this small world. But it's just an accident of geometry and optics. Now,
okay.
I just find that this would be completely unnecessary unless your conscience is nagging you that this actually was designed, or that this actually did show that we had significance. But he goes out of his way to say, this doesn't really show that we're significant. It's just an accident. But that's not what kind of scientific test do you say to come up with this conclusion? It's not a scientific conclusion, but I find it is an interesting concession that I think it certainly does bespeak of our special significance. I really do. But he goes out of his way to say, no, it's not special. Don't worry about it. It was just an accident of geometry. An accident of geometry. I find that to be incongruous as well. Geometry is very specific science of shapes and things. So I don't know how.
Apparently, size matters.
Yeah. Well, that's the fallacy. That is one of the greatest fallacies, I think, of modern scientific materialism, guys, is the idea that size, because we're small, we're insignificant. No, E. coli is very small, but nobody's going to say that's insignificant.
What I like most about Mikio Kaku is how he his presentation and how he makes science like Tyson. He makes science interesting. You want to learn more.
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as condescending. This is one of my favorite quotes by Carl Sagan. He made it shortly before he died in the Gifford lectures he gave. It's in a book that his widow Anne Druyan put together called "The Varieties of Scientific Experiences." And this, toward the end of his life, I think he was a little bit more friendly toward religion. But I kind of agree with him here. He says a religion, old or new, that stressed the magnificence of the universe as revealed by modern science might be able to draw forth reserves of reverence and awe hardly tapped by the conventional faiths. Now,
he also had this idea that God was the stereotypical old man in the sky with
it was he had a kind of a straw man view of God. But I think he's right here in one sense, that in a lot of ways, especially in the last 100 years or so, as a church body, as the church as a whole, we've sort of given over the heavens to mainstream modern secular science. And really, the heavens have been eviscerated from our imaginations and from our minds and from our thinking. And but I think he makes a point. Look at this. Dawkins calls the design or the beauty of the universe an illusion. At least Sagan acknowledges that the universe is magnificent.
But so does Tyson, even though he's a nihilist.
Yeah. So there's to them, to Dr. Sagan, the universe was genuinely really magnificent. That wasn't an illusion. But now we have Dr. Dawkins, who has said so many words that the design that you see in the universe is illusory. This is just a summation in my opening chapter that I write in our book, a paragraph summation of the modern materialistic, a summary of the popular attitude about our human place in the universe. An insignificant planet orbiting a nondescript star. We've been dethroned. We're insignificant. We're inconsequential. A thin film on an obscure and solitary lump of rock and metal in Bertrand Russell. said about a century ago, we are merely accidental collocations of atoms.
That's another philosophically illiterate intellect.
Yes, and then we go to. I want you to see this. They're in the. Have you seen? You've seen. We were just talking about the 2013 remake of Cosmos. One of its executive producers,
14,
Brandon Braga, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, gave a speech in 2012, and it's on YouTube. I have this footnoted in the book. He said, this is public. He said, religion sucks. Isn't science great? And how the hell do we get the other 95% of the population to come to their senses? And he's producing, as far as I know, he's still on the production staff for the new release, whenever that's coming out with, there's a third one coming out. I think it'll be either this summer or fall. But, the driving engine, production engine behind the Cosmos series that's going on Fox and National Geographic is being run by people that think religion is a problem. And that's something we hope to change with our book.
Make sure to advertise it also and make it.
Yeah, I'm in the initial stage of this. This is this is not in our book, but this is something that I got from John Lennox's great little book, Can Science Explain Everything? A great book, just a great book everybody should read. It's so short and so easy and so accessible.
No.
Go ahead, Brad.
I said spoiler. The answer is no.
Oh yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, spoiler alert. No, but
there's also the that one guy who posted that article that got a lot of butthurt reactions from village atheists that atheism is inconsistent with the scientific method.
Oh, you'd have to link that to me. I didn't see that one. But look what Lennox talks about here. He cites a book, according to the book 100 Years of Nobel Prizes, written in 2005 by Baruch Abba Shalev. It is a review of Nobel Prizes awarded to people between 1901 and 2000. The stats are staggering. 65% of Nobel laureates have identified Christianity in its various forms as their religious preference. 423 prizes represented by that percentage. Overall, Christians have won a total of 78.3% of all the Nobel Prizes in peace, 72.5% in chemistry, 72% of Nobel Prizes in chemistry go to believers, 65 in physics, 62 in medicine, 54 in economics, 49, almost 50% of all laureates, Nobel Prize winners in literature. I mean, you can't, I don't know when I use this, because when atheists say that Christians aren't intelligent, I'm like, well, I think you can.
Well, yeah. Just look at the 95% of the pioneers of modern science.
It's amazing. But these are two verses that remind me of this. This is Hebrews, of course. Without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is the rewarder of those who diligently seek him.
Oh, haven't you heard that faith is just belief without evidence?
Yes, I know. And then, great are the works of the Lord. They are studied by all who delight in them. And these are one from Hebrews and one from the Psalms, some of my favorite works. The last one there is Psalm 111. And this is Max Planck, who basically discovered quantum, the quantized the packets of energy. Got a Nobel Prize in 1918 for that work. And here's Planck, Max Planck, we named Planck time, the little half second after the Big Bang. Look what he says. Nowhere do we find a contradiction between religion and natural science. There is complete concordance in the very points of decisive importance. Religion and natural science do not exclude each other, as many contemporaries of ours would believe or fear. They mutually supplement and condition each other. The most immediate proof of the compatibility of religion and natural science, even under the most thorough critical scrutiny, is the historic fact that the very greatest natural scientists of all times, men such as Kepler, Newton, Leibniz, were permeated by a most profound religious attitude. We could make a lot more progress in science, I think, if more people were open to seeing things as Marx did.
And then there's Darwin, who himself said that he saw it absurd that one can be an evolutionist and an ardent theist.
Yeah. And then this is Robert Boyle, who helped establish the Royal Society in 1660. He was a chemist, and he basically is the father of the modern scientific method. And I love to show this to people because Christian being attacked as a Christian that doesn't know science. I'm like, well, Robert Boyle, that method you're talking about? Well, that's Robert Boyle, 1700s, a charitable English. He gave money to missionaries. He was a devout believer, very philanthropic with what he did. Again, founded the Royal Society, basically the father of modern chemistry, the father of modern scientific method, and was a devout Christian. So, here's more proof. A great book, Michael Hunter's Boyle, Between God and Science, written by Yale New Haven Press in 2010. A great book.
Well, just remember, appeal to authority fallacy.
Yeah. When you make the scientific method, you get to be the authority. This is a nice tweet I got. I've been sending out books to people. I've been selling them online through Twitter lately. Some pre-release copies if people wanted a copy of a pre-release book of me signing it. I've been sending it out, and people have been enjoying tweeting it back. But this one young lady, she was the first person to get a book in New York, so it was kind of cool to send it to her. She got a picture of it, and she took a picture of it in front of her bookcase, and then I saw the picture, and I'm like, "Did you put it in front of Cosmos on purpose?" And she's like, "I didn't even see that." So she took a picture right in front of Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and she circled it in the back there. I thought that was great.
She's in the audience right now.
Huh? Is she
She's
online?
in the audience.
Oh, hi, Laura. Thank you for that. It was wonderful. And she didn't do that on purpose. So it was really cool. So a lot of people have been tweeting that stuff, and that's been very encouraging. And so you wanted some supernovas, Luca. Here you go. These are supernovas. This isn't anything. These aren't artist renditions. Now, what these are two of the last supernova that have been seen in our Milky Way galaxy. Now, we've seen a lot of supernovas since then, but these are the last two that have appeared in our galaxy. What you're looking at are supernova remnants. So the thing blows up. These are stars that have exploded. Basically, that's what supernova are, the death of a star. And these are basically false color images from composites of different telescopes, like the Spitzer, the Chandra X-ray telescope, and then Hubble. So you have X-ray, you have infrared, you have visible light, and then the astronomers will use that imagery and make a composite image of the supernova. So much of this light...
Which one's closer to the actual color?
Neither. They're two different ones. The astronomers will tell you that they try to do it to as true a color as it would be if you could see it. So it's colored, but then again, they try to say, well, if it was, here's what it would look like. So, I mean, what the shape of it and what you're really looking at is really there. It's just the color. To me, I'm not being a scientist. I couldn't tell you exactly how they decide that. But it's pretty true to what they think you would see in total visible light. So the one on the left is supernova SN 1572. The one on the right is SN 1604. Now, what's those two gentlemen's faces that I just put in there? The one on the right is Johannes Kepler. He is the first one to be credited with seeing the actual supernova go off in 1604.
Yep.
And then you have 1572. That was credited to Tycho Brahe, who observed it. So these are the last two supernova that we've seen in the Milky Way galaxy. The last supernova we've seen in our galaxy was over 400 years ago. So we're due for a supernova in our galaxy. Hopefully it won't be our sun, but so that is, and you see on the left, Tycho's nose. When he was a teenager, or in his early 20s, he was in a duel, and he got half of his nose sliced off by a sword in a sword fight. And so he had prosthetic noses made of gold and silver, and he would use glue and sort of, gum and things to try to hold his nose on. So it was always kind of awkward. Half of his nose was missing.
Yeah, Kepler's my favorite scientist of the science.
We have a whole chapter in our book of Kepler and Brahe, written by my friend Wayne. He loves Kepler and Brahe as well. And Melissa Travis, Dr. Melissa Travis, she has a chapter a little bit that talks about Kepler's mathematics. Now, this reminds me of Scripture when Paul, skeptics like to talk about the resurrection, say there's no evidence for the resurrection, and Christians love to talk about 1 Corinthians 15.
Then you got the nutty Christ-mythers who deny Jesus ever walked the earth.
Yeah, if you do that to Jesus, then you have no history. Everything is mythical. But Paul, in talking about the resurrection of Jesus and the bodies, how the resurrection is going to work, that our bodies will be changed. Paul actually uses an analogy of the stars when talking about the resurrection. He says star differs from star in glory, just like we have a natural body and then we will have a spiritual, renewed, resurrected body. But this is 1 Corinthians 15:41. Paul using the analogy of stars and talking about the resurrection. And we've already seen that. Let me see. So this is another analogy. This is basic. This goes to Ed Feser. I think it's Feser is how you say his last name.
Yeah.
Yeah, Feser. This is an analogy.
Did you have him contribute to the book?
I wish. We had a very limited amount of time, but he's a great philosopher. Since we already had Paul,
you could have for him to go over the proofs for the existence of God.
Yeah, I have the last. What's the name of the book? The last
5 proofs for the existence of God.
I have 5 proofs, and then the last superstition. I have the last. Yeah. But this I either got this from 5 proofs or the last superstition. But I just love this. It's so wonderful. I wanted to share it with you guys. I'm sure you've heard it, so I'm not saying this is anything new to you, but this is something that I got from Feser. So this is a coffee held by a cup, sitting on a table. The cup is held by the table. The table is being supported by the foundation and the floor. The foundation and the floor is being supported by the earth. The earth is being supported by space-time fabric. All this stuff is happening right now. You got a coffee on the table. You got a table on the floor. You got the floor on the foundation. You got the foundation on the earth. You got the earth on space-time fabric. There cannot be an infinite regress of things supporting all of this. An infinite regress is not possible because it's happening right here in the now. And this is the way he takes us back to, I mean, this is not Feser, this is Aquinas and the classical theological, philosophical.
Oh, yeah. Haven't you heard Aquinas has been debunked?
Debunked? Don't get me started on that word. But anyway, the prime mover, this demonstrates, there's a scripture that, it's Hebrews, that he upholds all things by the word of his power. At some point, because all of this is being upheld right now, we can't have an infinite regress of things being held up. At some point, there has to be a foundation, and that foundation is the prime mover, the one who sustains everything, the one who holds everything, the unmoved mover, that kind of thing. I love that proof. I think it's so very profound and so very simple. But that's classic. I mean, that's sort of
Inspiring Philosophy also has some high quality videos when we're talking about the
he's good, he's real sharp. But I totally recommend the last superstition or 5 proofs, just to refamiliarize yourself with classic theistic arguments. I mean, it's just great, and Feser does.
And every time you bring up the 5 proofs, the village atheists will say they've been debunked when they can't actually debunk it. Then they'll just assert that you're arguing like from a presupposition, like you presuppose the existence of a God, but
right.
Yeah, after you show them that, then just point them to the book, because odds are that the book already addresses the objections they're going to bring up anyway.
Right. So this is another image taken by Hubble in 1992, just a couple of years after it launched.
I miss those years.
And then so are you in 90s? You love the 90s?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's the last great age before the world lost its fucking mind.
The 90s were, well, I grew up in the 70s, and
so you experienced the 80s also.
So I had the 80s, and I think my favorite decade was the 70s. Life was simple. Charlie Brown. Now, I remember, certainly there were problems, but I think I felt safe as a kid. Life was wonderful. Charlie Brown and Snoopy in kindergarten, and I lived in California in the 70s, so I liked the 70s. The 80s and the 90s were. I used to be, before I was a Christian, I had long hair, and I lived in Hollywood, and I was into hair metal, and I wanted to be a, striper and all that stuff, and that's about when Jesus found me with all my hair and tattoos and everything. I still have my tattoos, but I was into the 80s metal for a long time. But this was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. That is a picture of what they think are dust lanes in the middle of the center of the Whirlpool Galaxy, the M51. That is also something of a black hole. Not quite the image that I showed you earlier, but that is in and around a black hole, but they don't the dust lanes there are inexplicable. They don't really know what has caused that mark. But this is a thoughtful theologian I've enjoyed reading, Jeremy S. Begbie, Voicing Creation's Praise Toward a Theology of the Arts. And this was written back about the same year that Hubble took this picture, about the same time, 1991. But Begbie talks about creation ex nihilo here. And Dr. William Lane Craig talks about that in our book as well. But I love this quote about ex nihilo, and that is the doctrine of God creating out of nothing. And I like what Begbie says here. He says, if the one who suffered the shame of humiliation and crucifixion is also the one through whom all things came to be, then the act of creating ex nihilo, or out of nothing, can be construed as an act of suffering or sacrificial love, or at the very least, an act which lays God open to the possibility of suffering. God's creation out of nothing is best understood as an act of gracious love. He was compelled by nothing beyond himself, only by the love at the heart of his being, which is supremely revealed to us in the life and the passion and the resurrection of Christ. Creation out of nothing is accordingly not to be seen as an act of arbitrary power, but as an expression of the ceaseless self-giving love with God. So creating the world, I don't know how God knows or the future, but I know he does. And he must have known that when he created the world, what was going to happen. And it's just remarkable that he would do this.
Do you believe there's life on other planets, and do you hope that humanity's future will turn out, once we get out of this degenerate cultural wasteland, do you have hope that humanity's future will turn out something like Mass Effect or Halo or something like that?
I think that I don't know about life on other planets. Guillermo talks about that in his chapter, Dr. Gonzalez. I don't think that if there were, that it would affect anything in Scripture. I don't see that being a problem. I think it certainly wouldn't affect theology, but I think my eschatological hope is Christ's return. I have no idea how bad things are going to get before they get better. I don't know. I don't claim to know when Jesus is coming back, but I do know that there is that second. He is coming again. And when he comes, even he told his disciples, he said, when I return, will the Son of Man find faith on the earth? And that before he returns, the love of many will grow cold and there will be apostasy. And
2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1-3 already tells us that.
Yeah.
The great falling away, which is kind of happening now.
Yeah. And I see that, I don't know, is beginning, middle, end, where are we with that? It seems like Europe has already kind of gone nearly secular almost.
Europe's pretty much fucked now.
And in more ways. It seems like we're about a decade behind them. So it's sad and tragic. But I have, being a Christian now for 25 years, I've seen people fall away. I've seen people walk away. I've seen people who I knew to be Christians who are no longer Christians. I've heard a lot of the atheists that I've talked to and who I've actually befriended used to be in the church, and so there's
much of them used to be in fundamentalist church. I can tell.
Yeah. Some of them were the fundamentalism. They left the Christian fundamentalism, but became a different kind of a fundamentalist.
Psychology is intact. We see it everywhere.
Yeah, but that's pretty much what I had for you guys, unless you want to just chat about something else, the book or anything else. Or...
All right, you got any questions, Bryce?
Yeah, so I was just wondering, so you apparently worked with William Lane Craig. He gets a lot of hatred on the internet by a lot of atheists.
Yeah.
How's your general interaction been with him?
Well, my interaction has been mediated through our editor, Paul Gould, who knows him and has worked with him. Paul has worked with him professionally, both in conferences and in writing. And so they know each other. I have actually never met Dr. Craig. None of us. I've met Dr. Ward. I've interacted with Dr. Craig through Paul when we were talking about his essay and his contribution to the book and ideas about what he would write about and things like that. But he was very kind, very compassionate, very eager to be a part of this. And of course, he loves cosmology, so it was a natural fit for him. But he was super nice to be able to. I think, Brass, what you can say for sure is that Paul went to him with this project and told him who I was, and Dr. Craig could have said, well, I don't know who he is. What's he doing in a book like this? I don't want to do this. But he completely consented to being in a book with somebody that, like me, and Paul too, to Paul's credit, he goes up to a preeminent Christian philosopher and apologist and say, hey, we'd like you to be in a book with a guy that's never been published. Would you do it? And he did. And I think that speaks volumes of the kind of heart and compassion that Bill Craig has for what he does. He also teaches Sunday school in his church. His Defenders class you can find on his Reasonable Faith website. He does Sunday school. But he has a heart for Jesus. I mean, I've heard him interviewed, and I've heard Paul talk about him, and Bill loves Jesus. I mean, he does.
I suggest you or Sarah the Ender or one of any of the other guys who contributed to the book go on Stephen Colbert's show and promote it there.
Well, it's funny you say that, Luca, because Colbert is a Tolkien fan, and he loves the universe. And when I first tweeted, I actually tweeted him about that very thing, and he had said something the other night. Maybe it was about a month or two ago, and I saw it on a YouTube. It was a broadcast. I didn't see it when it happened. I saw it on YouTube or something, where he had made some concession. It was very brief, and he was kind of joking about it, but he said he was struggling with his faith or something. But man, the guy gets going on Tolkien. He gets going on Tolkien, and I would love to put a copy of this book in his hands and talk to him about it. Absolutely.
Strange he would say that, since he's basically a diehard Catholic and a Sunday school teacher.
I don't know if he was joking. I don't know what it was. I don't know the context of it. I have no idea. I don't know. I'd have to go back and look at it. But the thought came to me when I heard that whatever he said, the thought came to me, he needs to get our book, because it would be really cool. We have cosmos, and we have imagination, we have Tolkien, we have Lewis, and we have philosophy, and we have science.
Press him on one of you getting an interview with him.
That would be so cool. I would love to. My dream, Luca, is to go on a sort of world tour across the country, just doing stargazing, talking about stars, doing what we're doing. I love this. This is great, guys. I enjoy it, and I hope I could do this for the next year and a half, just talking about the book. It'd be great.
Yeah.
Anything else, gentlemen? I've enjoyed it. Just kind of throwing it around back and forth. It has been wonderful.
Anything else, Brass?
Not that I could really think of. What's your take on Original Sin?
I think, I'm pretty conservative on that. I think, I believe Adam and Eve were real. I believe the account in Genesis is pretty much where I'm at with it. I don't finagle with it too much. I take it as it is pretty much. I think that it was somehow through the first human beings, this thing called sin came about. Because the disobedience was there before the fruit was taken. They did something already, so it wasn't like they ingested fruit and got a disease. It was something in the will before they took the fruit, the decision to disobey God.
If there wasn't Adam and Eva, they definitely weren't the first humans.
Yeah, I the anthropological, biological situation there, I believe that they were, but I don't. It just depends. I don't get into the age question that much, or biology and anthropology is not my forte. But I have, for most of my Christian life, for all of my Christian life, before I really understood what I was doing, I took them, and still do, as literal and as the proto-humans. But I know there are arguments and positions out there that differ on that. But I'm okay. I don't mean to be controversial with people about that or not, but I'm pretty much literal when it comes to that stuff.
Okay. You got nothing else to ask? Let's read the live chats for a while. Laura Fasulo says, I live in New York City, and that's an accurate representation of the night sky. I look up and see nothing. Frowny face.
Oh.
I love to... I replied to her that the city's still beautiful, and she replied, it is, but I'd love to see what the night sky really looks like. Full of stars. Frowny face.
Come to Texas. Come for a visit. We'll take you to some dark sky spots.
G. Will says, This is reminding me of what Dick Dawkins said about if the stars were suddenly arranged in a pattern that said, worship Jesus. Well, that could have been incredibly advanced aliens playing a trick on us.
Is that a question or just a statement?
A statement.
Okay. That's interesting. Okay.
G. Will also says, oh gosh, Mr. Atheist tried to slam Newton by telling us about his belief in alchemy. And, to think we now know how to convert lead into gold.
Okay.
Let's see what else. G. Will asked you, how about the notion of the quantum realm being God's work studio?
Well, there's a lot that we don't know. I mean, when you try to make an observation in the quantum realm, there's this argument about how we affect the observation itself affects what goes on. And I think there is a lot in creation. If you look at the latter part of Job, when God finally responds to Job, it's an extended discourse about what God has done. And all of it is rhetorical questions for which Job has no answer. So God's workmanship, as Paul says in one of his other books, my co-editor, Paul Gould, that we're a God-bathed world. He's at work everywhere, and he upholds everything by the word of his power. And in him, we live and move and have our being, as Paul says in Acts 17. And so he works everywhere. The quantum world, Max Planck discovered that and got the Nobel Prize in 1918. And he was a Christian, so he got a little insight into God's workshop and got a Nobel Prize for it. So yeah, when you study creation and you're diligent about it and you know the creator, he has many things for you to discover. So, why wouldn't you want to follow Jesus? There's a lot of good things out there that you can discover and get a Nobel Prize for. That'd be cool. I don't know if that was an answer or not, but
okay, y'all got any closing statements?
I'm good. I have enjoyed it, gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, and I'm on the Twitterverse at @story_cosmos. You guys have that link there, and I have a podcast. And check out the website, thestoryofthecosmos.com, for more information on our book.
All right, this is HistoryNet and Mr. Brass signing out. See you next time. Share and subscribe if you feel like it.
Take care.